Now that we've looked at just a general graph of cosine, sine, and tangent, we're going to look at when we have different values instead of just a 1 cosine 1x. So this is just a continuation. And we'll call this part 2. Okay, so the previous video in part 1, we were looking at y equals sine of x. And we knew that it's going to look like it was going to be in the form of y equals sine x. Okay, and we had this graph. Okay, no questions asked. We started at 0, 0. Our period length here was 2 pi. Okay, so we're going to talk about what exactly is a period length, what is an amplitude, and all of that good stuff, because what happens if it changes? So the period length, that is how long it takes to make a full wave. Okay, let's look at when this is changed. Let's go with y equals, let's go with 2 sine of x divided by 4. Okay, so if we look at this, our picture here has now changed a little bit. Okay, so we have our original in red, and then in blue is our new one. It's a great thing about Desmos, we can color coordinate everything. So now, instead of going from 1 to 1, I'm now going from 2 to 2. Okay, that number is represented here. This is what we call our amplitude. So our amplitude determines how tall our graph is. Okay, so we're going from -2 to +2. So up here, this would really be a 1. That's how we know it went from -1 to 1. Now for this graph, we know it goes from 2 to 2, -2 to 2. But the 4, how does that affect us? Let's zoom out a little bit. Okay, so we know that x equals 2 pi gives us 1 period length here. Well, golly, on the blue one, that only makes us 1/4 of the way through. Hence the 4, we're only 1/4 away. But if I were to take that times 4, so let's go 8 pi, notice now we have made our full wavelength. Okay, so this got multiplied by 4, the bottom number, in order to give us our period length. Okay, so our amplitude determines the height. It's our vertical stretch. So now we're going to look at a generic formula here to help us figure out which one's which. Okay, so when we had y equals b sine x over a. Okay, so our period length, determining how long it takes to make a full wave, that was, when we're looking back here, this was going from the green to the purple. Well, we had to take that bottom number and multiply it to the 2 pi. And that's because 2 pi is just your original when you don't change anything with that 1 sine of x. Okay, so the period is determined by the 2 pi, and then it's going to be our A value. It's going to be the absolute value just because we're going in the positive direction. Now the amplitude, that was our vertical stretch. That was, remember, that was the number out in front. So if I'm going back here, my vertical stretch is the absolute value of B. And you can see where I got the A and the B from the green formula down below. The other thing that we need to talk about is the word frequency. I'm sorry, this lesson's just a lot of vocab. Frequency is the number of cycles in a period. And this is when you're comparing two graphs. So if I were to look at, coming back here to the ones that I showed you, if I were to look at this, if I'm going from the blue one to the red one, I can see here that I've had 1, 2, 3, 4. I've had 4 cycles in one period length of the blue graph. Okay, or you can reverse that. In one period length of the red graph, I've only covered a quarter. So that would be my frequency. It'd be a quarter there. So again, you're just looking at how many times does a full cycle or a wave happen. And that's when you're comparing two graphs. Generally, your frequency is going to be the reciprocal of your period. So this is going to be 1 over 2 pi a. Okay, so what they're going to be doing is they're going to be asking you for the amplitude, they're going to ask you for the period length, they're going to ask you to compare the two graphs in which you're talking just about those vocab words of period, amplitude, and frequency. And it's all based off of this equation right here. You could change this with cosine instead. It's the same type of effect of what's going to happen. You could change it with tangent as well, same type of effect.